improve, increase. There's nothing here. Which part do I repeat? Okay. My LinkedIn profile link. Anyway, so I have studied economics. Most of what I have studied, of course, and if people around here are familiar with the economics courses right now in India, most of what we have studied are the classical, neoclassical models, which assume a certain mental models for human beings, for institutions, for governments, etc. Now, today the topic that we have in hand is more or less a recent one in the entire field of economics, and kind of contradicts some of the fundamental assumptions made under the traditional models. So as I was saying, I hope I don't dish out a lot on my economic brethren there, but let's see. So who amongst you would consider yourselves rational? Show of hands. Would you consider yourself rational? Okay. So let's say you have the option, the first set of options there. You don't need to tell me, but decide if you had to choose one. Can you choose one? Are you able to make a choice between them? Between the 2.5 pounds and 3.5 pounds, euros, sorry. Yeah, 3.5. Then when you are placed with these set of options, do you see your choice moving or being the same? So perhaps you are in the minuscule population of rational people there, but I don't think that's generally what people like to admit in open forums like this. So what is typically seen is when people are given, let's say, a choice between the small and the large. Let's say we have one choice and the second choice. People would choose the smaller one. The moment you add one option in the middle, or you expand your choice set, people then tend to gravitate towards the middle one. That's mostly the reason why Starbucks, or for that matter any other coffee shop where you have more higher range of sizes, coffee sizes, you would tend for the medium one, for whatever the medium sizes. Similar is the case with popcorns as well in movie theaters. So that's how there's a concept called choice architecture, which I'll talk about. That's the way the choices are designed such that they make you gravitate towards what you would have probably not chosen, but to drive sales and volumes. So if we saw a few hands here who said they were rational, so let's hope I can convert you on the other side by the end of this. So what is behavioral economics? Like a simple layman understanding of behavioral economics would be a marriage of psychology and economics. Now, what maybe adding a few more layers to that will be, you add cultural factors, social factors, emotional factors, and what you have is how all these factors are affecting the choices that people make, the economic choices that people make, whether to buy, sell, postpone, consume, etc., etc. Now, typically, as I was mentioning, economic theory of rationality has its limitations. There are some assumptions which generally economists like to make, which is perfect information, cognitive abilities, computational abilities, and that all these, a rational human being can make a perfect decision within a given set of time. What happens is, we often see that we don't have perfect information. There is always information asymmetry, whether be it between a buyer-seller relationship, whether be it between colleague, employer-employee relationship, or for that matter, even husband-wife relationship. There's always an information asymmetry. You know more than what the other person thinks then you know. So there is also limited cognitive and computational skills. So for example, what economics or classical economists would like to believe is that Let's say you're given an option of 10 toothpastes. You have the ability to decide between all 10 toothpastes. The decision that you have made has taken into consideration your future utility, your current utility, the price that you have paid with respect to the income that you have, and based on what your actual demand for toothpaste is, and that purchase of toothpaste has essentially maximized your utility. That's the assumption that economists like to make. What we actually do is that whatever we grew up with, we'll pick that toothpaste. If you like Pepsodent, you've always grown up using Pepsodent, you will take Pepsodent, and you will hate the taste of Miswak. But then there are also, of course, a large target segment for Miswak as well. So what it essentially tells you is that these are heuristics that come into picture. I'll talk about more about heuristics, but these are cultural factors, emotional factors which have come into picture while making a decision while making an economic decision. We don't observe these assumptions in reality. There is no perfect information. We do not have the computational or the cognitive abilities to make all the decisions perfectly, and we do not have infinite time. There's a riddle that this is a quite common riddle to judge some things, which even Daniel Kahneman uses in some of his talks. Let's say there is a bat and ball. Together they cost $1.10. We know that the bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Okay, you need not shout out answers, but yeah, I mean, you can go ahead. Yes. Okay, do you know about this riddle? Okay. Anyone thinks 10 cents? 0.1? No? Listen, you've not thought about it? You've not? Okay, fine. Maybe coffees should go around the room now. So typically what is seen, and not my claim, Kahneman's claim, that when he asks this riddle in the most prestigious of the colleges in the US, typically on average people reply with 10 cents. That is not the correct answer. Anyone interested to do the math can go ahead, or I can discuss this later on what is the correct answer. But here what comes into picture is the two approaches that our brains take. So typically who says 10 cents, the answer to that riddle is 10 cents? 5 cents, yes. Okay, that was quick. So you had to use the system 2 of your brain. I'll mention what that means. So essentially there are two systems to our brains, system 1, system 2. This is Kahneman's model. Richard Taylor has his own maybe similar model but different names to it. What system 1 is doing is it makes fast, autonomous or automatic and kind of unconscious decisions. So let's say when you're driving a car and you apply a brake, that's system 1 taking over. If you're a seasoned driver, you automatically see the danger or whatever it is. You apply the brake. It's only mostly after you apply the brake that you realize, okay, I had applied the brake and what is it that made me apply it. At the same time, let's say it's a crowd, you are in a traffic jam and you have to actually take a U-turn around somewhere. That's when your system 2 comes into picture. System 2 is much more deliberate, it is much more effortful. You take conscious decision or conscious thinking is applied when system 2 is taking into picture, has taken control. So when you have to take that U-turn is when system 2 comes into picture, and you measure where the distance of the cars are, where is how far away from the divider you are, etc., etc. Another example could be if you want to gauge the distance from here to some place, or you want to gauge the depth of an object. That's when system 1 comes into picture. Or, for example, if I ask you 2 plus 2, you know the answer, it's 4. There are some things which are so ingrained in your mind that you know what the answers to it are. If you're learning to ride a bicycle, initially It is system 2 that comes in, because you're very conscious of the balance, you're very conscious of what, if there is a small hole on the road, which way you will fall, etc., etc. But once you are in the zone, once the skill is acquired, it has now transformed into a system 1 operation. So brain now is in system 1. So typically an example would be 2 plus 2, answer to that would be a system 1 answer. If I say 17 multiplied by 29, that's a system 2 answer. It's not like you don't know it, you know it. You'll just have to apply your brain to it, as you probably also did that math in your head, right? So, and I'm sure you also had to. Maybe if so if one does the math, you go through the steps, it's a more deliberate, longer effort. That is when system 2 comes in. Now, where do biases and heuristics come into picture then? That's when system 1 is in the picture. Because you are not thinking about it, and that's where rules of thumb are that's when they get used. So whenever system 1 is the driving or the front, is at the front line of decision making, that's when heuristics come into picture, biases come into picture. Of course, biases and heuristics are important. Evolutionarily, that's what has helped us survive. There are some biases, there are some heuristics which have developed as learned behavior. Like I'm sure there was one primitive man who didn't know that lions could kill you or eat you up. So he didn't run away. Then after that, he saw them attacking or taking one of his fellow mates. That's when that heuristic developed, that next time, boss, you have to run away from a lion. So that's now a heuristic. That's a learned behavior we have over generations. Our brains are trained for it. System 2 kind of approaches take time. You have to learn specifically, you have to put in efforts to learn that behavior. So this is another image which acts like a good illusion here. How many of you guys see a young woman? And how many of you see an old lady? Yeah. Let's say that does not say anything about you in person, but so for whoever saw one but didn't see the other, that's your biases coming in, because you have a certain image of a young person, and that's you have attached that image, maybe the cap and the long hair. That's what you have attached to that image, and hence the system 1 has automatically told you or instinctively told you that it's a young person, young girl. For others who have a certain image of an old lady, that's where this came in. But it has both. So I'm sure I don't have to explain. Yeah, I'll give the slides later or Google this. So this slide will just give a some broad examples of some of the common heuristics and biases. Now, these are what we call dual system biases. So that's when system 1, system 2 are not consistent, or one comes up when the other should. That's when such biases or heuristics come into picture. These are time or temporal biases. I think one of the more popular ones is present bias, where we all know that on average, maybe it does not apply for each and every one, but typically when studies happen, the results or the study, how it concludes is based on averages. So if in a group of people, if when asked whether will you take $100 today or $110 1 month later, mostly people would opt for $100 today. Although with just 1 month wait, after a 1 month wait, you can get $10 more. Typically, based on the, you can vary the amount difference, you can vary the period duration of the gap as well. But what is typically seen is that people want more today, or at least smaller award today than a larger award tomorrow. So there is something called as SSLL. So people want smaller sooner than larger longer. So there is a time discounting that comes into picture. So the more we go ahead in time or future, we start discounting our value of money quite fast. So tomorrow, between 1 week and 1 month and 1 year, it's not consistent. The discounting of money is not consistent. Then there are some biases which come from interpersonal relations or social relations. Something which we have seen is fairness and reciprocity. So there is an experiment, I think it's called, I forget the name of the economist who did that. So it's like a game theory experiment. So given, let's say, there are two people and there is $1 to be split. Person 1 will be given the choice of splitting the money, and person 2, if they like the arrangement, the split, they take it. If they don't like it, nobody gets anything, right? Fair enough. So economic theory or other economics rationality will say that the first person has a huge advantage. They can keep 0.99 cents to them and just give 1 cent to the other person. And the other person should take it, because if they reject it, they'll get 0, right? So rationality will tell that, okay, you should at least take 1 cent and nothing, at least you get 1 cent for that participating in that experiment perhaps. But theory says this. Same experiment was done in labs, and when I say labs, these are basically grad students in fancy colleges where professors run these experiments. So when the same study was done in labs, it was seen that people cared, the person 2, whoever was in person 2's position, cared for the amount given to them. If it was anywhere less than 40 cents or something, they rejected it. They said we are better off not taking anything than taking a meager amount. So this is where ego, self-respect, fairness, reciprocity comes into picture. So this came as a diversion from what theory suggested, because if you do a Nash equilibrium on the first one, like a game theoretical approach, and you do a Nash equilibrium, then you get one answer. But the labs will tell you some other answer, like in reality. You can think about it, and you can also do it mentally. If someone offers you, if you find 100 rupees on the road, two friends find 100 rupees on the road. If it's not 50-50 or something closer to that allocation, perhaps you won't take it. You'll say you're better off. We find that with auto rickshaw drivers everywhere. They are better off sometimes taking the lower amount, but they would rather not, right? That's where these heuristics or cultural heuristics, personal, social heuristics come into picture. Now, of course, I won't have time to go into each of these. Happy to discuss and happy to tell you also the sources for most of these. What I can flag is Kahneman and Tversky's Judgment Under Uncertainty is a very good paper that covers a lot of, that places the foundation for a lot of these heuristics and biases. After that, of course, Thaler and Danarelli have, Thaler and Sunstein, Danarelli have laid foundation, have built on it. So coming to the core topic at hand today also is how do we apply these in finance or in fintech solutions. I'll stick to fintech mostly because that's where I work, and marrying the experience between what I've had as a researcher and now for a year and so as a product manager or a team person, we are in the product team. We also get to see how people respond to some of these nudges, which nudges work, etc., etc. How do you apply the theory of behavioral science again to application? So these are just two models here. Does anyone, okay, yeah, the name says here. This is Nir Eyal's very famous hooked model. So it says, and this is typically how almost all habit forming products work. Right from Twitter, Facebook, most of the social media platforms which are habit forming. Other than that also perhaps Candy Crush, I mean right from the content platforms to game platforms. So what happens is essentially there is a trigger that starts, internal or external. That trigger could be internal or external. Internal could be you're feeling low, you open Facebook, you see other people, you want company of other people, virtual company perhaps. You open Facebook. This is the investment that you do by opening Facebook. There is a variable reward. The reward generally is never constant. Anyone who analyzes how games work will also know this. Typically, digressing here a bit, but typically games, any farm will say like a, right from I think more complex games as well, I'm sure. I'm not well aware of what the recent ones are, I know some. So the first few levels are never very easy. The first one is, the second one is. Third onwards, third to 10th, they are never too easy. There is a certain level of complexity or certain level of difficulty that they insert. So that once you play that or once you cross that level, there is a dopamine that hits your brain. You have a sense of satisfaction and a sense of success, and then you move on to the next one. And you want the difficulty level to increase a little. That's where the variability of reward comes. It's not like always the games will linearly be more difficult, of course, but there is a certain level of unpredictability that is attached to it, and content platforms also work a lot on this. You never know what you will find on Twitter, on your Twitter homepage. So there is a certain unpredictability that is attached to the variability of the reward. Once you have variable reward and then you receive that reward, and that kind of attaches you to the next level of trigger. So next time again when I'm feeling sad, or if I'm outside and I have an external trigger to post something, to put something up, to share something, again I'll go through that cycle. This is one model. Another model is a Stanford professor called B.J. Fogg. He has a behavioral model, which is basically, if you want any behavioral change, it has to be a combination of M, A, P. M is motivation. So for example, let's say in our case, it would be motivation to save. Ability is not the income ability, but the simplicity of that action itself. How simple is that action to do? For example, again in our case, how simple is it to open the service or the app and save? How many clicks does it take? How much does it depend on the internet connection, etc., etc. Then there are these prompts. Now prompts are nothing but, to put it very simply, reminders, let's say. But that can be a simplification of this. Prompts could also mean that what is the usability, or what is the utility of that action at that time. So what any successful behavioral change, maybe like a campaign or a product or a service would do, or for that matter even policy would do, is you marry all these three. There should be a motivation to do something, the simplicity to actually take that action, and the prompt which comes as an external trigger. So these are, yes.
Incentives for the prompts?
Could, yes. Yes. So these are two models. I'm sure there are others as well, but we'll move ahead. So if you remember this chart, right? There are different ways to overcome some of these biases. There are proven ways as well. Now that's where we'll see what applications in fintech help. So choice architecture, I alluded to this term at the beginning of the presentation. What choice architecture essentially means is how you design the range of choices such that the user, the end user, whoever be it, makes sure that he or she is gravitated towards the choice that you want them to make. So if you remember the Starbucks example, right? If given a choice between small and large, people generally were choosing small. The moment you add a medium, so you've changed the choice architecture there. You've added a new choice. You're not forcing anyone to choose one option. You've just expanded the choice set. People then gravitate towards medium. Something similar here is, so let's say you have in supermarkets, the way the shelves are stacked, right? Now, in our case, in supermarkets, typically sometimes it's mostly done, let's say, through maybe economic motives. But there is a study in, I think, in Apple or Google, in the cafeteria in Apple or Google. So they wanted to make sure that employees eat more healthy food. I'm not sure if we have the kind of infrastructure here to do that, but they have a huge spread in their cafeteria. So they had seen that people were grabbing more of sugary items, desserts, chocolates, snacks, junk food more so. They changed the choice architecture a bit, like they changed the choice setting a bit. All they did was they kept the sugar foods and the desserts at the end of the spread. So when you enter, it's at the end of the spread. So people who came in hungry, they first filled themselves up with salads or whatever the other healthy options were kept, fruits, salads. Automatically, this led to a lower consumption of junk food. So it's not like people were banned from eating one item or the other, or they were pushed to eat one. But you change the choice architecture a bit such that you gravitate them towards a choice that you want them to make. Now, that motivation may be different if you are a business, if you are a company, if you are a government agency, etc., etc. So essentially what it means is you add options or you reduce options. Again, you can increase friction as well. In some cases, you increase friction to take the bad choice. So basically, people then automatically take the path of least resistance, and they'll end up on the on the better choice. Social norms or social proofing. This is very commonly done, where they'll say, okay, X% of users have done this, or we use people like us, the parameter of people like us. So let's say you will be profiled, or there will be certain maybe geographical profile as well, and they'll say, okay, maybe X% of people did this, so should you. It can be done on both ways. I think one of the government initiatives did it to increase the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, the campaign that was run there. So if you want people to not do something, you highlight the small marginal number of people who actually do it. So then they feel, okay, they are in the minority, so they'll be discouraged to continue with that action. Then it was open defecation that was method that was used. Then if you want people to encourage voting behavior, let's say people say, okay, X% of women came to vote last year. So you would think, oh, I'm one of the few ones who didn't go, so I should join the social norm. In general, humans have a tendency to attach to one social norm or the other, so one tribe or the other, but I won't digress there. Default option, very commonly used. So you have an option which you have two. One is default, let's say ticked or opted in. So you have to take the decision to opt out of it. I think there was in US there is a retirement plan 401k plan forms that you have to fill. So what we have in PF, we have compulsory deduction. There you can opt in or opt out. So when they ran a study where opting in was the default option, and you had to actually go and inform the HR or whoever to opt out, they saw the enrollment rates went up. On the other side, in France, I believe, organ donation is something is commonly done there. So by default, you are in the organ donation list. If you want to opt out, you go to their government office and you go and fill some forms and you opt out of it. So it is not like you don't remove the choice of opting out, but you place it in such a way that you help them make the better decision. Now, of course, if there is no intent of doing something, then you can always go and opt out of these choices. So one way that maybe finance can help, or fintech products can work, is you minimize the choice overload. You start with some default options. There are enough studies on how choice overload or decision paralysis comes into picture. And given the number of choices that are in place, users generally get overwhelmed. Maybe not the users who are right now in this room, but people, end users, low income segment, they have a number of choices, and the number of choice set itself is so large that they get overwhelmed and there is no decision that is taken. So something that you can start off with is you have by default one option, you start with that. At any time if you want to change, you change it. So replicating mental accounting, now we have goal-based savings for that. That's typically one way to look at it. So mental accounting is again a bias that people hold. That's money held for education cannot be used for marriage. Money is money, it is all green. So essentially any rational person would not segregate it in those terms. But the bias that comes into picture is that you have attached color to that money. This is also called colored money. So you have attached color to that money. Gold given by my mother-in-law will never be sold. But if 1 gram gold that I buy, I'll sell. Like a gold biscuit that I buy, I'll sell. Both is gold. So in how you view your assets or how you view money, it takes a different course through mental accounting. So how you do it, you replicate the same models. So you meet users where they are. If they like to do mental accounting, fine, we'll do it with you. You want to set money aside for education separately, for your premium separately, for your emergencies separately, we'll do it with you. Okay. That also helps them in calculating or setting aside monthly contribution as well. Maybe one has more priority than the other. So how they set aside money for each one also helps. Decision points. So, okay, I'll take 2 minutes for this though. It's an interesting option thing that behavioral economists have spoken about. So if you see like a packet of Lays or chips, okay. Nowadays, I mean the normal size of packets of chips has gone on increasing. They initially start with 10% extra, but then that becomes the norm or the normal size. And of course, the prices also adjust upwards with that. What we have seen is, or what studies have seen is that when given a choice of, let's say, 2 packets, 100 grams of chips, and 1 packet of 200 grams of chips, you give 2 different set of people the choice to open and start eating them. When you have that larger packet, your decision to end the chips stops only when the chips packet has finished. When you have 2 smaller packets, on the other hand, what happens is, after you have, let's say, finished off 1 packet of 100 grams, you have entered a decision point. So now you have to decide whether you want to open the second packet or you don't. And more often than not, you don't open. So what the big packet of chips has done is, it has pushed the decision point further down the road. When we, and that happens with any of the consumption goods with larger serving sizes as well. So maybe soft drinks serving sizes being larger, or chocolate, or etc. etc. So how we in finance also you can enter decision points. Reminders are a decision point. Like a very simple example would be reminders. So in our day-to-day lives, we would not think about savings. This is Dan Ariely's one quote somewhere, that what is in your day-to-day life that reminds you to save? There's absolutely nothing. You will remember to watch a movie, to continue a show, to write a report, to finish your work, pick up your kid from school, etc. etc. But as such, to save, it's only when that reminder strikes, or you see one bank, maybe an automatic investment plan that you have enrolled in, that you remember that okay, you have saved. Again, this is not maybe for everyone in the audience. I see some more sophisticated, of course we as an organization will have more financially sophisticated individuals within us, but I'm talking about the average, the end user here. So reminders are when you insert a decision point. Sometimes decision points work in different ways as well. Another example here would be, so there are these pills, antibiotic pills, which you are typically supposed to complete the course for. right? You should not leave an antibiotic pill midway. So there was one study where they found that typically after the symptoms were subsiding, patients would not continue taking the pills. So a simple change would be that you color them differently. So now the way people think about it is the 3-week pill was red in color. Now I have to start with my blue colored pills. So the way you enter decision points to continue a behavior, to discontinue a behavior, depending upon the context, of course. Loss aversion and sunk cost. I'm sure people around in the room know about what loss aversion is. So you are more scared of losing than gaining. So for example, you don't, given a choice between getting $10 and $10 which you didn't have, let's say you find $10 on the road, okay, and after that if I tell you I'm going to take those $10 away, and basically you are net you are on the same, you are essentially on the same level, and there is another option where you never had those $10, okay. Am I giving the right example? Let me think. There are multiple studies I'm getting confused with. Okay, there are gambles actually in place as well. So let's say you are given 2 options. One option would be you get $250 for sure, okay, and 50% probability you lose 50% probability you get $250 and 50% probability you lose $500. So essentially the expected utility, if you have a similar kind of, let me get back actually on this, I will not confuse everyone here, but I'll take this offline. Between all the other math, I'm getting confused here. But essentially what it means is that when people are more scared of losing something than gaining the same amount. So for example, if you want to, yeah, sure, yeah.
One option is you get a short $250. The other option is 50% probability that you get $500.
And 50% probability you don't get anything. Yeah.
Choose this.
Yeah.
Even though from where you're standing you don't have anything.
Yeah, that would be a good option. So essentially the expected utility in both cases is you get $250 with, but I'm not sure if the probability in the second case works. Anyway, I'll give you an example in how it works in application. So for example, you want people to invest maybe 5,000 rupees a month, okay. Instead of saying that if you invest 5,000 rupees, in 1 year you would receive 500 as returns. We say that if you don't invest 5,000, you lose 500. The numbers are the same. Both the numbers are notional. They have not yet invested. In the second case is when the emotion hits home deeper. So that kind of motivates that person to invest or to take the decision to invest. So for example, even accident insurances work like that. So instead of saying that, okay, you will get this payout when you meet with an accident or etc., what they'll say is that if you meet with an accident, you will lose X amount. Framing, I'll show you an example of this. A lot of people do this essentially anyway, is there's a concept called pennies per day. So you anchor the price of a certain commodity or the product in such a way that is relatable to the end user. So if you say 400 rupees for an insurance, okay, and that is an amount that they are not able to compare anything with. Perhaps because they have not purchased an insurance, perhaps there is no other comparable insurance products that are there. Excuse me. So what is essentially done is you divide the amount into pennies per day. So it's you tell, okay, it's like spending 5 pennies per day. In Indian context, you must have seen it is like spending 2 cups of tea, something that we have as well here. So what we do is then that user is now thinking in terms of, okay, there is 1 cup of tea, I can perhaps spare that 1 cup, or 3 pennies a day, I'll be able to spare 3 pennies a day. So how you frame the product or the offering or the statement makes a huge difference in how the user or anyone else considers it. So these are ways on how the biases and the heuristics are countered, so that at the end the end user takes the decision that will lead to his welfare. I have some examples on some of these. So this is like sunk cost or loss aversion, both ways. So if let's say someone has invested this much, has gained this much, etc., etc. This led the user to take the next step and invest again, because A, they are already in it. So losing or stopping now is something that they don't want to consider, and they want to continue increasing this gain amount as well. So making information upfront. This is social proofing. You tell how many people of a certain group have done a certain thing. If they're related, if of course this could go either way. If that's a group that they are absolutely not able to relate with, this is going to hit a dead wall. This is pennies per day kind of a framing. So this is something that I've not spoken about. This is what, I mean, I have economist as an example here, but given these three options, let's say you have these three options, which one would you choose? I mean, either anyone will choose one, option 1, okay, option 2, you will choose option 1, okay, option 2, option 3, okay, otherwise others I'm guessing are not interested. I'm not going to actually sell you this. Hypothetically, what would you choose? 3. Okay. So this could be considered that either my talk was a success or not. But so what they have done is, and this is quite well documented, is it's called a decoy effect. So they place, see, you're comparing between these two. Okay, you're either going to read it in physical or you're going to read it in print. It's absolutely unlikely, and they know this. It's unlikely that you're going to read both. Given these two options, okay, let's say this was not there. Given these two options, they saw people were taking this up, right? But they wanted, of course, more revenue. So they added a decoy option, which is, we'll give you this and this. See, think about it. If they have made this, then they have the soft copy. Okay. This is at no additional cost. But the way they present it to you, or present it to us, even I must have, in fact, I must have actually chosen one of these options. The way they'll present it, or the way the options are presented, is that there is additional benefit. But perhaps there is none. If you put your system to mind to work, perhaps there is no additional benefit in taking in option 3. So what is in work here is a decoy, which is placed for users to use, for users to shift to a certain option. Now, this is something that we won't subscribe to and we won't do, but this is also something that providers, practitioners across all sectors employ. I think I have some, yes. So this also leads to the discussion of where do you draw the line, right? I mean, where do you want to stop playing God, and where do you want to stop tinkering with the choice architecture? So that's a question that is open-ended. There is no final definite answer to it. Thaler and Sunstein say that a nudge is something that is cost-less or a absolutely low-cost direction that you give to the user, such that they are working in their social or individual well-being. So that way they have defined the nudge in a certain way. So the choices that the list of options that we said applications, those are all nudges. Those could be used as, those could be called as nudges. Like adding a decision point is a nudge. Reminding someone, using social proofing is a nudge. So essentially you are giving them choice, but you are deciding what choices. So this helps, everyone who's at the helm of choice architecting should be mindful of this fact as well, that every design or every option that we choose or that we put up is also going to play a role in how the user is interacting with it. So again, choice architecture is for personal welfare or business welfare. It is up to what the objective of the choice architect is. Another one critic of nudge would be, what is the sustainability of nudge? Let's say, how long can you remind people to invest, right? I mean, every month for the rest of your working life you will be reminded to invest, and only then will you get a sizable retirement savings. So that's also, that is up to question. At some point there is something called as, there will be informed behavior has to come into picture. So nudge can go maybe halfway. The idea of a nudge is that you can costlessly ignore it as well, right? So if you've looked at Gmail's snooze feature nowadays, we've stopped using Gmail nowadays, that's true. But if you ever receive some emails on Gmail, so they have a snooze icon. So they'll remind you after 2 days or whatever. So that's something that's a perfect example of a nudge. You can ignore it very easily, but if you want it, it's there. But how long will the sustainability of nudge work? At some point, you have to inform the user to take the step out of system 2 coming into picture. So system 1 can work or drive up to a certain point, but after a point, it should be informed or thought through. Sludge, that's a term Thaler and Sunstein have come up with. So essentially, whenever you use the choice architecture against the user or for your own personal benefit, when there are more frictions, let's say to undo an option or to get out of the service, that's where they have used the term sludge. So it's quite nascent like that, but I just wanted to put that up. So this is just quite an example. If you're not able to read, there is a tick here required saying, I want to receive emails or offers. And here there is a default tick saying daily newsletter, weekly and monthly. So in the second case, the provider has put the decision on the user to unclick. There are certain, again, places where you have to click to opt out, right? Or you have to go to their emails and unsubscribe and give a reason to unsubscribe, etc., etc. So that is adding friction. Okay, that would be a sludge. Here, of course, if you want to receive it, you would receive it. Another small thing that I have done is, with the color choices itself, I have signaled you which one is right, which one is wrong. That again is adding or reframing the choice architecture. So I think with that I'll end my talk. I hope this was useful. If there are any questions, suggestions, I'm happy to discuss.